All right, guys, welcome to this week's edition of Next Thing I Knew, part 2 of the dog bite story. So if you haven't seen part 1 of the dog bite story, you need to go back and watch that one. I'll link it below, so that way you're able to understand this story from beginning to end. But first, before we get started, let me tell you where I'm at today. Today, I'm at Sisu Coffee Shop here in Casco Antiguo in Panama. And today I'm going a little bit different. Instead of getting coffee, I decided to order a matcha latte. So let's take a sip of this. And while I take a sip of this, go ahead and grab your coffee, your matcha, your tea, whatever you like, so that you can sit along and listen to this story time with me. So cheers. Oh, that matcha's good. That matcha's really good. Okay, this was a good choice. All right, so let's get started with the story time. First, let me pick up where we left off. So last week, where we left off was, next thing I knew, I'm sitting in a hospital in Cartagena 5 days later with my arm swollen up to here. But before we get there, we kind of got to backtrack just a little bit because a lot happens in 5 days, right? I was in Medellin, got bit by the dog, got it cleaned up, went to the clinic, the doctor or the nurse, whoever, put the rabies vaccine in my arm, gave me a little vaccination card, and I was on my merry way, right? Well, over the course of 5 days, my arm and my hand start to swell. More my hand than anything, honestly. So it's swelling. The day before I go to the hospital, I go out that evening with my friends, we're partying, things like that. So mind you, I'm like taking care of this dog by putting alcohol, things like that. I'm also traveling with a nurse. I won't say who's the nurse in the group, but I am traveling with a nurse. And so she's like trying to help me maintain it clean, bandages, all that stuff. So I'm thinking I'm doing all the right things. And well, I thought I was doing all the right things. So that night I go out with my friends and we're at a bar in Cartagena. So we've already left Medellin and we're now in Cartagena. And while we're at the bar, a random guy is next to me and he sees my hand and he's like, "What happened to your hand?" And I was like, "Oh, I got bit by a dog a few days ago in Medellin." And he was like, "That's infected." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "That's extremely infected. You need to go to the hospital." And I'm like, "But I don't know how much it's gonna cost. Like, I'm traveling in a different country. I know Colombia is cheap, but going to a hospital, like with the American mindset, I'm like, oh, thousands of dollars are gonna go out the window." So this random doctor at this random bar in Cartagena basically tells me, "Oh, the way I look at it, you have 2 choices. You don't go to the hospital, you save money, you lose your hand, or you go to the hospital and you maybe save your hand." What should have told me it was serious is the fact that my hand was like this swollen. And whenever I had my hand, like if I put it down and put it up, I could feel the blood rushing through my arm. It's a type of sensation that I don't know how to explain that well, but it literally felt like blood was rushing up and down my arm whenever I would move it. So I eventually just stayed like this so that it wouldn't hurt when I moved my hand. Oh, like that's the level we were at. You'd think at some point, like I would think, okay, maybe I need to go get checked out. But no, it took a random doctor in a random bar in Cartagena while I was drinking to convince me to go to the hospital. But here's the caveat. The next day we had a tour to an island to go to this beach, and it was an all-day tour. And so I told my friends, I'm not gonna go to the hospital and miss out on this tour. So what did I do? I went on the tour. This is a perfect moment to take a break to have another sip. So let me grab another sip real quick to continue the story, because trust me, it gets crazier. So as I was saying, I went on the tour because in my mind, I'm in Colombia with my friends and I don't want to do anything to jeopardize their time. And I'm trying to include all the group activities and not be excluded. So I'm just like sucking up the pain and moving on with my life. So we go on this tour. Now, as we get to the beach, it's a beautiful beach. We're having fun. My friends are swimming and I was like, I don't want to get in the water because I don't want to get water in these open wounds and I don't have bandages here. And somehow I get convinced to go in the water. So I get in the water, but I'm thinking, oh, I'll just stay like this in the water. So that way, like, nothing happens to my hand. Next thing I knew, a wave comes and takes me out. Literally, I am tumbling in the water, and I'm a good swimmer, but I'm like face down. When you see those videos of like people getting like sucked up in the ocean, that was me at that point. I walk out of the ocean, soaking wet in my hand, and I go to the bar that was on the beach, and I was like, hey, do you guys by chance have any Band-Aids? Because I'm thinking Band-Aids are really gonna work right now. And the bartender sees my hand and was like, what happened to you? And I told him, and he was like, go to the first aid room over here. My wife is a doctor, and there's another guy there that's a doctor, and have them look at you. I'm like, okay, warning. This is about to get really graphic and really disgusting. So if you have a weak stomach, you're gonna wanna skip. I'll link below the timestamp or whatever to where you wanna listen, but you're gonna wanna skip what's next, especially if you have a weak stomach. So, real quick, I'm gonna take another sip and we'll finish this story off. Dang, this is so good. So, go over to the first aid room. And there's this older gentleman who was a doctor. He takes a look at my hand. He says, oh my God, that is extremely infected. And he starts to squeeze my hand like this. And this is the gross part. I literally had green pus just like spewing out of right here, and over here, where the dog's teeth had gone and punctured my skin. And the more he pressed, you would think like my hand would be deflating. It would like inflate back. And he just kept pressing. And he said, as soon as you get back to the mainland, you have got to go directly to the hospital. Directly to the hospital. Do not go to the hotel. He was like, they're going to have to give you penicillin injections because that's the only thing that's going to get rid of this at this point. I'm like, okay. Flash forward, we get back to Cartagena. I force my sisters to go with me into the hospital because that's what sisters are for, right? And so we go to the hospital and we're waiting at the hospital. Finally, I get seen at the ER. And when the doctor sees me, she's like, what happened to your arm? Because at this point, the infection's up to here. And I explained to her I was bit by a dog. And she goes, let me see your vaccination card. Because I told her I got the rabies vaccine. She takes a look at my vaccination card and she looks at me and she says, they didn't give you the rabies vaccine. Mind you, up until this point, I hadn't shed one tear. I hadn't cried at all throughout this entire process. Even though I was in pain and everything, I didn't cry once. As soon as she told me that they didn't give me the rabies vaccine, tears just started flowing down my cheeks. And my sister looks at me and was like, why are you crying? I was like, no one survives rabies. I don't want to die right now. And she was like, shut up. And the doctor was like, look, you probably don't have rabies because if you had rabies, it would show up pretty quickly and you would be dead right now. But still, we need to get you the rabies vaccine. And you have something called cellulitis. Like your arm is extremely infected. And I tell her, I'm traveling with a nurse and she can inject me. So I don't care if you have to give me injectable antibiotics. I will have her inject me, whatever. She literally prescribed me 2 oral antibiotics and an injectable antibiotic that I had to do an injection each day for 3 days. And she looks at me and she says, honey, if this doesn't cure it, nothing will. I was like, oh, okay, so this is serious. I was terrified at this point, like literally terrified that if this medicine didn't work, I was gonna lose my arm. And that was just like the reality. And also, this is the moment when I'm like, Janelle, what were you thinking? Like you went 5 days without going to a hospital to have your arm checked out because you just wanted to tough it out so that you could enjoy your trip in Colombia and not destroy the trip for everybody else that you're traveling with. So hindsight 2020, I should have gone straight to the hospital. I should have never waited. So this is my tip to you. Don't be like me. If you get bit by an animal, head directly to the ER. It doesn't matter where you're at, how much money it costs, none of that. So, all right. She gives me a prescription. She's like, we have a pharmacy here in the hospital. You go pay for it. At the end of the day, ER visit and all of the medicine that I had to buy. Mind you, this was in 2019, so it's been 6 years since I went. But everything in total was $75. $75. Literally, I saved my arm. As you can see, it's fully intact, thank God. I mean, I have scars. I don't know if you can really see it, but in between my finger, I have a scar. Over here, I have a scar. On my finger right here, I have a scar from the dog's teeth, right? But luckily, my hand is fully functional. So with that being said, $75 later, 5 days, $75 later, I was able to save my hand. That's the end of my dog bite story. Don't be like me. Don't play with drones in Colombia when they tell you to be careful with dogs. Don't wait to go to the hospital. And well, just a word of advice. If this does happen to you, the one thing that helped me during that whole Colombia trip was aguardiente. So I mean, if you want some help with the pain, aguardiente works. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Next Thing I Knew, the final part of the dog bite story. Make sure you stay tuned next week where I post my next story while we check out another coffee shop here in Panama. And I pick a story at random from this jar. Trust me, there's some other crazy ones in here, so stay tuned to see what happens next. Welcome to this week's edition of Panama on a Plate, where we discover the different flavors of Panama fork first. I'm gonna let this wheel here choose what restaurant we go and try this week. I have different restaurants here, and after I spin it, we'll know where I'm headed this week. So let's see. Cielo. So we are gonna check out Cielo, and let me know what restaurants in Panama you recommend that I put on this wheel to check out. Make sure you stay tuned for this week's episode of Panama on a Plate. See you there.